In the previous video we looked at multiplying a monomial with a monomial, so we started with multiplication. Now let's look at multiplying polynomials with monomials. Okay, this is what Mrs. Trollope and I would call the cat's whiskers. Okay, if we draw a cat over here with its little eyes, little nose, this is what we call the cat's whiskers because we do that. Okay, so the distributive law, you can call it the cat's whiskers, but you must know that it's called the distributive law. Okay, we use the distributive law when the bracket cannot simplify. So for example over here, inside the bracket we have unlike terms. We can't multiply, we can't add and subtract them. So we must now take this thing in front and distribute it there and there. Okay, now the in-between step, and I'm going to write it in color because it is confusing. You don't need this, is 3x multiplied by 2x. That minus comes down. And then we have 3x multiplied by 4. Okay, but this you usually do in your head. You say 3 times 2 is 6. X times x is x squared. That minus comes down. 3 times 4 is 12, and the x comes along. So you don't need this step. In fact, I strongly advise against it. Notice that when I'm done multiplying out, when I'm done distributing, the brackets disappear. Okay. So let's look at this short way. We're going to take this and multiply it in there, there, and there. Negative times positive is negative. 4 times that invisible 1 is 4. And we add the exponents. A to the power 2 times a to the power 3 is 5. Okay. Now, you don't need to do this. Again, you can do this differently, but that minus actually comes down. Now we have negative times 2 is negative. 4 times 2 is 8. A squared times a is a to the power 3. Okay, do you see what I mean with that step is actually confusing? You don't need it. And that plus comes down. And we have a negative times a positive, so that's negative. 4 times 3 is 12. A squared times nothing is still a squared. Okay. But let's have a look at how we do this without that step. We'd say negative 4 times 1 is negative 4, and then add the exponents a to the power 5. Negative times negative is positive. 4 times 2 is 8. A squared times a is a to the power 3. Negative times positive is negative. 4 times 3 is 12, and the a squared comes along. Do you see it still follows from this, but you don't need this in-between step. I find it more confusing. Okay, so let's do a question without that step. So we have a bracket times a bracket. Now I'm going to rewrite this so that the monomial is first, but you don't need this step. Okay, you're going to distribute in there and there, and remember that whole thing distributes. Or, if you're like me and you rewrote the monomial first, you're going to take that whole thing and you're going to distribute it there and there. Okay, so negative times positive is negative. 2 times 3 is 6, and the m comes along. Negative times negative is positive. 2 times 4 is 8. M times m is m squared. Isn't that easy? Okay. Let's look at a difficult example over here. When there's nothing in front of the bracket, there's an invisible 1. Now see, there's a multiplication here and here. So I'm just going to multiply this first. That negative 1 is going to be distributed there, there, and there. Now because I'm multiplying twice, because I have a multiply here and there. In fact, let me do it a little bit differently. Let's say negative x squared minus 2x plus 3. And that's times negative 4x. Okay. I'm going to move the monomial in front. So that negative stays where it was. And then we have negative 4x coming to the front. Okay. And we have x squared minus 2x plus 3. That's still there. Okay. Now, let's have a look. We have a negative and a negative next to each other. There's no power here, so we don't need to do anything with that. A negative and a negative become positive, so that's 4x. Okay, positive 4x. This is going to make it so much easier. That's x squared minus 2x plus 3. Okay, and now I'm going to distribute. You can do it this way. There's no problem doing it that way. If you want me to show you that way, please let me know. But this makes it easier. We're going to take that whole thing and distribute it in there, there, and there. 4 times the invisible 1 over there. Remember, it's 4 times 1, not 4 plus 1. 4 times 1 is 4. X times x squared is x cubed. Negative 4 times 2 is 8. X times x is x squared. Plus 4 times 3 is 12. And the x comes along. Okay. But you'll see this one looks very similar to the previous one, except this is now a separate term. This is one term, and that's another term, as opposed to the previous one, where that was one big term glued together with multiplication. Okay. You cannot distribute one term into another term, so you only distribute with one term. This is an invisible 1. We're going to distribute it in there, there, and there in that one term. Okay. Negative 1 times x squared is negative x squared. If you want to write the 1, that's fine. Negative times negative is positive. 2 times 1 is 2. Alright. A negative times positive is negative. 1 times 3 is 3. And then the negative 4x comes along. Okay. Do you notice that the brackets fell away since I'm done distributing? This is like to that. We're going to add them together. Okay. So the negative x squared stays where it was. Positive 2x minus 4x gives me negative 2x, and the minus 3 comes along. Right, let's look at something like number 6. We have like terms in this bracket, so they need to simplify. 5 minus 3 is 2, and it stays p. Right. Now we have in brackets 2p squared minus 3p plus 1. If you wanted to, you could leave this in brackets, but you really don't have to. We're going to take that 2p and we're going to distribute it into the bracket there. Alright. 2 times 2 is 4. P times p squared is p cubed. Positive times a negative is a negative. 2 times 3 is 6. P times p is p squared. Positive times positive is positive. 2 times 1 is 2. And the p stays where it was. Okay. That's our final answer because they're unlike terms. Right. Let's compare that to number 7. There are no brackets around this. So this is one term and the second term. There's an invisible multiply there. So what we are going to do, and you need to be very careful for this because we like doing this. We're going to take that negative 3p and we're going to distribute it in there, there, and there. Okay. The 5p stays where it was. Now we have negative times positive, that's negative. 3 times 2 is 6. P times p squared is p cubed. Negative times negative is positive. 3 times 3 is 9. P times p is p squared. Negative times positive is negative. 3 times 1 is 3, and the p comes along. Alright, and now we're just going to add like terms together. That is like to that. 5 minus 3, 5 minus 3 is 2, and the p comes along. And these just come down because they didn't have partners. Okay. Let's have a look at number 8. This is one term glued together by the brackets and multiply. This is our second term glued together by the brackets and multiply. Okay, so let's look at that first term. We're going to distribute there and there. 5x times x is 5x squared. 5x times negative 2y is negative 10xy. Okay. Now I'm going to take that negative 3 and I'm going to distribute it in there, there, and there. Remember, after I'm done distributing, the brackets disappear. So negative 3 times x squared is negative 3x squared. There are no more brackets. Negative 3 times negative 2xy is positive 6xy. Negative 3 times positive 2y is negative 6y. Now we're just going to add our like and unlike terms, our like terms, sorry. 5x squared minus 3x squared is 2x squared. Negative 10xy plus 6xy is negative 4xy. And the negative 6y comes along. You're going to practice this by doing exercise 8 on page 89 and 90.